NFL Week 6 proves to be much calmer than it was in the chaos of NFL Week 5. I am StatSational here for the Sharp app, and the show, of course, is called Scratchin and Surviving. Welcome to what has become one of the most popular shows and probably the best analysis you're going to get for survivor pools, hoping to get you guys all the way to the finish line and cash in and make that big money in your survivor pool. Hopefully we'll learn a little something along the way. Now, last week, we had some sweats. It wasn't easy, but most of the big favorites and most of the teams that were taken heavily in survivor pools advanced. You look at the Grandissimo, which is the big circle pool, $100,000 entry pool. There were 16 people that started last week. Just one got eliminated. 13 of those 16 were on Green Bay. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But one thing about last week, the Colt game, back up a second. I do these videos on Wednesday afternoon. By the time Sunday rolls around, some of the information that you're getting here on these videos may be a little bit dated. We get line moves, we get injuries. That was the case with the Indianapolis game. Indianapolis became a much stronger play on Sunday morning when we got the news Kyler Murray was not going to be playing. That line had moved. And if you're not on top of it yourself, you may miss out on these opportunities. Now, of course, I did a video a few weeks ago in which I said, that same situation happened in the Rams-San Francisco game, and San Francisco goes and upsets the Rams. Of course, the world gets upset, but I would much rather be diligent and pay attention than just be ignorant and not pay attention to the line moves. They're not always obviously going to go in your favor, but you want to get the most up-to-date information you possibly can before you make your picks and right before your entries lock. So you might want to put your picks in on a Wednesday, Thursday, and then come Sunday, just double check and make sure those are the games and the teams that you actually want based on where the market is. So, of course, you guys have been watching this show for a while. You kind of are getting a feel for at least how I like to do things. There is a bunch of ways that you could play Survivor Pool. You're talking about fractions of a difference in playing absolutely in the most optimal way, which is next to impossible, and then playing kind of with your gut. As long as you're not playing extremely crazy where you're playing a lot of underdogs or things like that with no actually rhyme or reason, you're really only gaining a small edge in survivor pools. So, and sometimes you just get lucky. You play a team that maybe you shouldn't have played. They had a ton of future value. Let's say Baltimore, for instance. You play them early in the year. I played them in, I think, every one of my picks on one of my pools. Actually, in both of them, I think in DraftKings and the big one. Well, DraftKings is the big one for the big money, but the large one that a buddy of mine runs, I think I used Baltimore in just about every one of those. Then you get a Lamar Jackson injury, right? It changes the entire way things go. So maybe that Baltimore pick, you're like, I won with Baltimore, but there were other teams there that were lesser quality with less future value that week, and then things change. So sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But the point is, we're not always going to be able to pick optimally, even if at the end of the season you go back and try and pick the highest point spread. And by the way, that is, no matter what anyone argues, and people continue to argue with me here, the most optimal way to play is if you knew exactly what the path taken each and every week would give you the highest probability in each one of those games winning. In other words, you may have to pass up a team that's a 10-point favorite because in a week that they were an 8-point favorite, that differential between them being an 8-point favorite and the next best team was greater than when they were a 10-point favorite, right? So it's even difficult to figure out after you got all of the information after week 18, and you could go back in time and look, and the odds are pretty good. If you played optimally, you were going to lose. That's just the nature of the pools. I told you guys in the beginning of the year, you had a 0.3% chance of advancing if the lines were exactly the way they were on opening day all the way through week 18, which of course we know they're not going to be. So it becomes really, really difficult to survive in survivor pools. Inevitably, we are going to all get knocked out. Well, hopefully not all, because we've had a lot of winners on this channel in the past, but if you're playing multiple entries, certainly you're going to be losing some along the way. That's the whole point of playing multiple entries. All right, let's get into week 7 and let's see what we got going on. So we'll look at my spreadsheet first and see what the spreadsheet is saying for this week. Now, we've got a large favorite here this week with Kansas City. 87.7% chance based on, of course, you guys know I just take the midpoint of the Pinnacle line. It's not the ultimate way to get rid of the VIG. I get it, but you're just talking about fractions of a percentage here, and it's not going to change things all that much. All right, so Kansas City, 87.7% chance to win. Similar to Baltimore last week, where they were about 91, 92% chance to win. And we saw a lot of people, of course, not Baltimore, I'm sorry, Green Bay last week. We saw a lot of people on that Green Bay side last week. For those of you in Circa and those in Grandissimo, I don't know if we have any Grandissimo participants, they have to pick the Thanksgiving game and the Black Friday game, as well as a Christmas game. So they essentially have 20 weeks to pick. Now, Kansas City does play Dallas on Thanksgiving. They also have a game on Christmas. So a lot of people will not be playing Kansas City in those pools for that reason. So they're not going to get as high a pick percentage. More than likely in your pool, it's pretty straightforward. You will not be be forced to pick on those holiday games. So in your pool, what we're estimating here from Survivor Grid, about a 45% of picks are coming in on Kansas City. Again, they're the biggest favorite this week, but we've got a couple of decent favorites coming up right behind. You've got the Denver at the Denver home for the Giants, close to 78%. You've got New England here at about 75, 76% at Tennessee. And then Green Bay, where, of course, most people took last week, they've got about a 74% chance of being of winning their game, right? So we've got 45% chance on Kansas City. The threshold column is starting to become something that we want to pay attention to. You take a look at this, 79.8%. This is based off of a pick percentage of 44.6 and the win probability of 87.7. If you are in a pool that's getting down to a very few amount of people, the Grandissimo is a great example. We had over 80% of people last week on Green Bay. You would have been wise to move off that Green Bay pick at such a high number, even though Green Bay was a very likely chance to win that game. And by the way, that game was a lot tight. Excuse me, a lot tighter than a lot of people thought. In that game, if you or last week, if you would have taken one of the next best favorite, which wound up being Indianapolis in there, you gave yourself a huge advantage. What we're trying to do at some point, it's real hard to do in the first few weeks, but depending on the size of your pool, ultimately, the more opportunities you have where if things break right, you win the pool. I mean, that's what you're trying to do, right? That's what you're trying to achieve. So getting on top of the same pick everyone else is may be the most optimal play, which is what we're trying to do when you're down to very few people in the pool, but it may not be the right play in a game theory standpoint. And that's why I developed that threshold column. So what this is saying is, if your pool does have about 45% of picks on Kansas City, you really don't have an alternative that you'd want to get off of if you were looking to fade Kansas City for that reason, because you're going to need a team that has about an 80% chance to win. Of course, guys, part of this is science, part of it is art. So, use your judgment. But the biggest art part of this is kind of guessing at what the pick percentage is. Now, if you're down to 5 people, this is based on overall pools throughout the all these websites that Survivor Grid draws from. Some of these pools have 5,000 people left or 5,000 entries left. Some have 5, right? So your pool is going to differ. So when you guys leave comments down below, I'm going to be asking you, when you're like, hey, I've got 7 people left in my pool. Well, I'm going to be asking you, how many do you think are going to take Kansas City? Because that is going to really skew the way we view this and the teams that we're willing to take. So if you think that this number, if the number in your pool, let's say, goes up to 55%, well, now we're at a threshold of 76, and then it brings Denver into the equation as a potential team, and certainly a team not a lot of people seem to be taking. The Giants, of course, are getting a lot of publicity here. They're on a little bit of a roll. Everyone likes Scatterboo, Dart, the whole nine. Denver coming back from a trip overseas. A lot of people are not on it. But again, I tell you guys, you've got to go with what the win probability is. I know, I'm going to beat this horse. Fine. I know you have to use your gut if you don't want to use Denver, but you could use New England if you wanted. Okay. If that was if you felt better about it, it's only a 2% differential. The reason I like Denver in that situation is just because I'm pretty confident if you had 7 people left in your pool, you'll probably be the only one on Denver. And if you thought 55, let's make the numbers easy, right? So we can do the math easy. Let's say, let's say it's 7. Right? So 7, because then there's 6 other people in the pool. And let's say now of the 6, you think 4 of those 6 are going to take the Chiefs. Well, that gets you down to 70%. And that says, hey, any of these teams, Green Bay, New England, or Denver, would be a viable candidate as a fade. Now, me personally, I'm going to take the team with the best probability of winning in that situation, and that would be Denver. And I get the added bonus of they probably won't even have anyone else on them, right? If 4 of 6 in your pool and you're the 7th are going to be on Kansas City, in your estimate, well, there's a good chance that 1 or 2 would probably be on New England, and then you'd be the sole one on Denver. If you were to get that Kansas City upset, or you got Kansas City and New England both lost, you're sitting with a chance to win and take down your pool. And that's the positions we want to put ourselves in. Ideally, we want everyone on one side. I always think of these things as, I try to look at the extremes. Even if you were if you were in a pool here and there was day 1, 1,000 people all took, let's say this was week 1, and 1,000 people were taking Kansas City, and you all put $10 in. It was a $10,000 pot. Everyone's going to take Kansas City, 999 entries on Kansas City, but you had to take an underdog. You were forced to take an underdog. Would you do it? Well, let's go back to the spreadsheet. I mean, the spreadsheet's going to kind of dictate to you, or at least it's going to give you some idea as to if that's a good decision or not. But you should intuitively be thinking, you know what? I've got a shot right here with a loss from Kansas City to pick an underdog, right? Let's go to let's actually go to to here, and we'll say 99%. 99.9%. We've got 999. This threshold's basically saying you can take any team, which should make sense to you, right? So if we go back to that 67%, 70% threshold here means, okay, we're going to take any one of these other teams as a good play, right? To go back to the example, you could take any team that's basically going to show up and have a chance. If you had to take an underdog, and let's say the best underdog had a 45% chance to win their game, do the quick math here. We've got an 88%, so you've got a 12% chance Kansas City's going to lose, and you've got a 45% chance that you're going to win, right? So if we do the math, 10%, you've got let's say you've got about a 5%. You guys are going to want the exact number, but you got about a 5% chance there, right? Let me bring up my calculator, and we'll get the exact number. But we're saying 88% chance on one team, that is Kansas City, to win. You multiply that by the probability, or the 12%, I should say, chance that they lose. So we'll take that 12% and we'll multiply it by the 45% chance that we have. That's a 5.4% chance to win on week 1. Is it going to happen? I mean, unlikely. You've got a 94.6% chance that is not going to happen, but it is far better chance than you had you were a 1 in 1,000 chance to win that pool on day 1 in our hypothetical situation. I've got a 5.4% chance to win and make, let's say that $10, I'm going to make 1,000x on my money on a $10 bet. You're going to do that every time, right? It's not part of the fun of these pools, but it would be real interesting to be able to have that opportunity, and you'd be in a far better situation than playing out the entire season where you would have a much lower chance. So I like to look at it on the extremes because I think it makes a little bit more sense. So if you're in a pool and you think 67% or more are going to be on Kansas City in your pool, then of course I'd be starting to look at alternatives here. And for me, it would be Denver. All right, but we'll go back to, what do we have it at? About 44.6%. Denver, I mentioned not many people are going to be on Denver. Some have taken Denver already. So we look at Denver here. Again, the Giants are kind of popular right now. A lot of people like the momentum that they have. Not saying that the Giants won't win this game, but if we look at the market, which has increased since yesterday, these were a lot closer yesterday between New England and Denver. It has opened up by 2%. They were like 0.1% differential yesterday. As a matter of fact, I think New England was slightly ahead of Denver in the market. By the time Sunday rolls around, who knows? Denver might be 72% chance to win this game based on the markets. And this video will be moot, right? So you've got to pay attention to the market. New England here has got a 75.5% chance. A lot of people taking them. They like the momentum. Drake May has been playing phenomenal at Tennessee. We know how the problems with Tennessee. Many of you watching this, Tennessee did cost us a couple of weeks ago against Arizona, but of course, more Arizona than Tennessee. Green Bay gets another what should be easy matchup, 74-75% chance that they win their game, but a lot of people have taken them, thus only the 3%. So keep in mind here, if you're on New England, you've got a similar likelihood of your game winning with a team that is going to have a lot more of your opponents on them. Let's head over to Survivor Grid and just see what it looks like here this week on Survivor Grid, and then we'll look at some of the future games for some of these teams, make sure we're not getting ourselves in any trouble, maybe by taking one of these top plays. You've got Kansas City, again, the big favorite. You know, oddly enough, you look at Kansas City, not a ton of games that you're going to get too excited about until you get to this Tennessee game at Tennessee in Week 16. So certainly in a small pool, they make a lot of sense. And again, more than likely, most of your opponents are going to be playing them. So use your judgment there. Leave a comment down below. I'll try to help you out with that. Denver at the Giants. You know, they've got Dallas at home next week. I don't know if it's as good a play as the Giants. It's going to be a really similar line. You've got Vegas in Week 10. They may be an even bigger favorite against Vegas, right? So that's part of the reason keeping people off Denver. But again, if you're in a small pool, you've got a shot to take this down now. I'm not worried about Week 10. New England at Tennessee. They get Cleveland at home next week, so another pretty good opportunity. And there's plenty of reasons here not to play New England. This would be another one of them as they're home against Cleveland next week. Should be a pretty decent favorite. And we look at the rest of the games next week. Indianapolis is going to be a big favorite, so you probably won't need New England. Although a lot of us have taken Indianapolis now that I'm thinking about it. Of course, I took Indianapolis with a few of my picks here last week, so it's something I have to think about myself here as well. Philly gets that same Giant team next week that they just lost to last week, but this time at home. And like I said, I thought this line would be similar after the game of Philly losing that game. I said Philly will probably have a similar line to what they had that Thursday night game because that line's going to drop a little bit with the Giants showing that they have improved in that game. So we'll probably get a similar line to what we did last week in that game that they lost on Thursday night. So we will see. So we do have some options here in Week 8 if you did take New England, which is why I think a lot of people are probably getting on them this week. And we look at Green Bay. You're going to have more opportunities if you passed on Green Bay last week. We mentioned it. If you didn't take Green Bay last week, they've got this Carolina game upcoming in Week 9, which looks like a pretty juicy spot. So we'll look at the spreadsheet again and then just add the future value in there and see what we're looking at with maybe some more of these teams that have a little less future value. So if we move this to 50% on our future value, of course, I like this for pools that are a little bit more of a chance that we're going to go deeper into the year. That we may possibly go to Week 18. If we get to Week 18, maybe we'll win this one on our own. So it's really, there's not a hard number here, but just judgment. Now, yesterday, Chicago showed up as the number 2 team because, as I said, Denver was not as big a favorite as they are today. So now, interestingly, as I'm looking at this, Chicago is the 3rd choice. But I still want to take a look at Chicago here because lack of future value, this 33 number basically says there's not a lot of games where they're going to be a favorite for the rest of the year. So let's take a look at Chicago on the Survivor Grid. Let's see if that's true, because sometimes, this number is just doing an accumulation of all of the games that they have remaining, but there might be one game that looks particularly good on the schedule. Maybe that's the case. So we don't want to necessarily just totally dismiss Chicago. So you look, they've got the New Orleans game this week. Now, home against the Giants, with the Giants improving, I don't know if that's necessarily all that strong of a game, but they should be a favorite in that one. The Bears did look decent there on Monday Night Football in their win. They get Cleveland in, Week 15, right? And I think outside of that, that's going to be it for them. Yeah, I mean, they're going to be a dog here. Green Bay at San Francisco, Detroit, Philly, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, all these games. So are we really looking to save Chicago to go deep? This could very well be the highest point spread we get and the largest favorite Chicago is. And then you're seeing that 15.1% pick percentage on Chicago. It is for that reason. So definitely a team that we should consider in pools of a little bit larger size. Let's go back to the spreadsheet again. We'll take a look at if we increase this now to 100%. So at 100%, we're looking at more, accounting for future value a whole lot more. And Denver becomes the second choice here behind Chicago. We just looked at Chicago. Let's just take a look at Denver, their full schedule again, just to make sure that we're not running into any roadblocks here. They are a minus number, which indicates that they're going to be favored by more than they're going to be an underdog for the rest of the season. So let's see how that looks here on Survivor Grid and see if we're going to run into any problems or potential problems in the future if we are on Denver. So you see Denver, of course, the 7-point favorite this week. I mentioned that game, week 10, Las Vegas should be very similar. We've got next week's game against Dallas. You've got Indy if you haven't taken them yet. You've got Philly, and then New England, all up there as potential picks for next week. Buffalo at Carolina. Baltimore, we'll see if we get Lamar back. Maybe a much better pick here against Chicago. There may be some options, but that's going to be up to you. I don't know who you have left. You may have taken Philly and Indianapolis already and do not have them available. You may have taken Buffalo, whatever the case may be. So just keep that in mind. Potential pick next week for New England in week 8 against Cleveland. You've got them against the Jets, which is looking like a very good play here in week 11. What are some of the other week 11 games? Well, we got Green Bay's at the Giants. You've got Baltimore at Cleveland, Buffalo home for Tampa, Houston at Tennessee, New England at the Jets. This one's going to probably be an even larger line than Survivor Grid is projecting right now. So you do have an opportunity here in week 11. They're at the Giants here in week 13. So there's going to be potential to take New England again. I think with the ownership or the pick percentage on New England, I could definitely see New England not being as strong of a play as maybe a lot of people are thinking, just because the future value on paper doesn't look all that great. But there may be some opportunities here taking a New England team that does look a lot better than they have, or maybe than some people had thought coming into the season. So you're going to have to, of course, make that call yourself. It's going to vary based on the teams that you have taken. Of course, leave a comment down below. We'll help you out with that. Let's just look. Anyone else really being taken a lot? There's not many, right? So you see this, the bulk of the entries are coming in on 3 teams: Kansas City, New England, Chicago. Pittsburgh's the next team that we're seeing some interest in at Cincinnati. Cincinnati has, of course, not looked very good. What's the rest of the season here look like? Similar situation to what we had with Philly last week when we said, well, I don't know if I want to take Philly on the road when I'm going to get them against the same team 2 weeks later. A little bit larger gap in between both of these games, but I certainly like Pittsburgh at home against Cincinnati more than I will like them on the road. The fact that this 4.5 line doesn't make much sense when they're a 5.5 point dog here at Cincinnati. So this probably will be a higher line, assuming the same exact players, no major injuries. Rodgers is not out. We've got maybe Flacco's going to improve with that team. I don't know. He looked pretty decent last week. I'm still not a believer that Joe Flacco with that offensive line is necessarily going to be all that much of an improvement, but we shall see. But if you're looking at it from today, it's hard to believe that they're going to be a lesser favorite in week 11 against the same Cincinnati team than they are now. I don't believe we're going to get a Joe Burrow back at all. Pittsburgh gets Miami at home in week 15, which looks like a fairly decent matchup. And they're at Cleveland. So not a whole lot of games that you're going to love to take Pittsburgh. Some of you may have taken them last week, but there's a couple. I would say the Cincinnati game and this Miami game are going to be your 2 best opportunities. So we're getting at that point in the season now where you've really got to pay attention even more so to the future weeks, because you are starting to limit yourself on teams that you can take, right? So we want to make sure here that we're not getting ourselves in a bad situation for future weeks. And I think we've got a few options here. It's going to vary based on the pool that you're in, the size, the amount of people left, and what you feel maybe in those small pools. If you feel like so many people are going to be on Kansas City, there's good opportunities here to be able to fade Kansas City, still give yourself a high likelihood to win, and potentially win your entire pool. All right, that is going to be it for me this week. As always, I appreciate your comments, and thank you all for watching. If you want to give us a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, of course, we appreciate that here at the Sharp App. Guys, I will be back with you next week. Hopefully, you are all back here with me surviving, and we'll see if we can make it all the way to the finish line on Scratchin and Surviving.